members of the Diplomatic Corps, Pembiwura, chiefs of the Gonja Traditional Council, MMDCs, the J.A. Braimah family, many distinguished invited guests here like Professor Alabi, the author, our distinguished author, Al-Hassan Ahmed, ladies and gentlemen and members of the press. It is really an honor and a privilege. As I stand here, I feel goosebumps to be here at the invitation of the author to be the special guest of honor on the occasion of the launch of this historic biography of J.A. Braimah. I would like, first of all, to commend Al-Hassan Ahmed, the author, for exhibiting the difficult discipline to document almost exhaustively the life of this great personality. This day is indeed historic in many respects. My own father, Alhaji Mumuni Baumia, of blessed memory, and J.A. Braimah had a history of a very close and cordial bond, which dated back to their time in the Northern Territories Council. Our two families have since maintained this very close and cordial and warm relationship, even after the demise of both of our fathers. Indeed, it is not by chance that our two families stayed and continue to stay in Kanda here in Accra, and they've done so since the 60s. Born in the Kanyase royal family on 31st August 1916 in Pembi, in now East Gonja municipality of the Savannah region, J.A. Braimah started school at the Tamale Infant School and continued at the Salaga Primary School. However, due to the restrictionist educational policy adopted by the colonial government at the time, schools in all parts of the Northern Territories, such as Northern Ghana, except Tamale, ended at Standard 3. As a result, after Standard 3, J. Braimah proceeded to the Tamale Middle Boarding School, from where he completed in 1932. Mr. Chairman, when the new system of native administration, popularly known as indirect rule, was introduced in the Northern Territories of the Gold Coast in 1932, J.A. Braimah became one of the first Northerners to be appointed native authority clerks to kickstart the new system of local governance. He rose through the ranks to become a senior native authority clerk and secretary to the Gonja Traditional Council. From this position, J. Braimah served on many committees and commissions set up to ensure the momentous inclusion of the Northern Territories in the affairs of the Gold Coast. Prominent among which is the Justice Henley Kuse Committee on Constitutional Reform, set up in October 1948 by the Governor, Sir General Creasy. The recommendations of the Kuse Committee led to the formation of the Henry Award Committee, whose mandate was to work out the technicalities of the delimitation of constituencies and the establishment of voting procedures, qualifications and disqualifications of voters and the candidates for the 1951 elections. The Northern Territories Council was therefore given the opportunity to have, for the first time in history, a representative in the Legislative Council to discuss portions of the Ewart Committee report that affected the Northern Territories. J. Braimah, who was the Vice President of the Northern Territories Council, was selected together with Yakubu Tali and S.D. Dombo as representatives of the Northern Territories. They were sworn in on the 24th of July, 1950, making J. Braimah and his two other colleagues the first ever Northerners to serve as members of the Legislative Council, which was the parliament of that time. J. A. Braimah would go on to serve in the 1951, 1954, 1956, and 1965 parliaments of the country. Meanwhile, after the 1951 elections, the Convention People's Party, CPP, won the majority of the seats in the Legislative Assembly. In the Northern Territories, however, the elections were conducted by Electoral College and not based on political parties. Therefore, all 19 members from the North entered the Legislative Assembly as independents. This implied that if Dr. Nkrumah were to select ministers solely from the CPP members of the Legislative Assembly, his government would not have anybody from the Northern Territories. J. A. Braimah was therefore appointed by Dr. Kwame Nkrumah in 1951, following Governor Charles Noble Arden Clark's recommendation to serve as Minister of Communications and Works, becoming, in that capacity, the first ever Northerner to be appointed a minister in Ghana. Mr. Chairman, aside the immense work J. A. Braimah undertook as minister in the areas of energy, roads, water, posts, telegrams, aviation, railway, ports and harbors, and educational infrastructure, he still found time to keep in touch with all persons who needed his attention. His position as cabinet minister did not in any way cloud his sense of community. He was down to earth and did not stand by ceremony. Thus, he did not request any of the privileges that are sometimes associated with people of his position. This made him very welcoming and someone in whose presence many people felt very comfortable. It did not therefore come as a surprise that the Daily Graphic adjudged him the most popular minister in Nkrumah's first government. Exclusive editorial, the Daily Graphic, in its number 529 issue of 1952, affirmed that, and I quote, "If the question, who is the most popular minister in the cabinet, is put to the citizens of the Gold Coast, the reply in 9 out of 10 is bound to be Joseph Adam Braimah, Minister of Communications and Works." End quote. J. Braimah was a man who wears integrity like a badge. There was absolutely nothing that could make him compromise his position. For this reason, when he realized that an amount of money he had received from Axel Kasajan, a contractor, was meant to influence him, he immediately tendered in his resignation, to the shock of the governor, who reported to have asked him to consult a psychiatrist. J. Braimah thus became the first indigenous person in the country to resign his position as a minister on basis of principle. Meanwhile, ladies and gentlemen, the journey towards self-determination picked up steam with the CPP government's acceptance of the Van Leer Commission's report in 1953. This report recommended the abolition of the electoral college system of elections in the Northern Territories and thus heralded countrywide elections through adult suffrage and identifiable political parties for the 1954 elections. Mr. Chairman, I now want to give a background to the Northern People's Party, for which J. Braimah played a very, very important role along with his colleagues. Following the riots and agitations in Accra and other southern principal towns for immediate independence from the British colonial rule by Dr. Kwame Nkrumah and other leaders, the Kuse Committee was set up in 1948 by the colonial government to draw up a constitution to advance the independence program. The Gold Coast, then in the pre-independence era, comprised the regions of the colony, Ashanti, British Togoland, and the Protectorate of the Northern Territories. The committee recommended, amongst others, the creation of a legislative assembly based for the first time on universal adult suffrage for most parts of the regions of the colony, Ashanti and British Togoland. The Northern Territories, because of the mass illiteracy and poor education, was for the first time to have an electoral college to elect 19 representatives to the new Legislative Assembly. Mr. Chairman, these elections took place in 1951. The North was then comparatively backward, with a poor educational system, the highest educational institution being a middle school. These were the government middle school in Tamale and the Roman Catholic middle school in Navrongo, with less than 10 primary schools in the whole of the North. There was not a single secondary school in the North, but a few Standard 7 pupils were selected each year for 4 years training in Achimota as teachers to teach in the few primary schools and the middle schools in the North. As a result, the highest school graduates were those with Certificate A teachers or the certificated Standard 7 scholars. Road infrastructure in the Northern Territories was poor. Telephone and postal services were virtually non-existent. Apart from the poorly constructed and ill-equipped Tamale Hospital, there were only a few dispensaries at Salaga, Wa, Gambaga, and Navrongo. Treated pipe water supply was limited only to Tamale, the regional capital. Mr. Chairman, the Northern Territory was left in its backward situation as it was during the immediate pre-independence period, not because of its protectorate status, but because of a deliberate policy of the British administering authority. The British policy, as seen in the archives, was to let the North remain a reservoir for the recruitment of labor for the mines, timber, and cocoa industries in the then colony and Ashanti. The idea, ladies and gentlemen, was to develop the South first and consider the North later. As a result, education was limited only to the middle school level, as I said. Northerners were not encouraged to make contact with people in the South for the fear that Southerners might influence Northerners to kick against the policy being pursued. As a result of this policy, education was neglected in the Northern Territories. Mr. Chairman, by January 1954, there were rumors that Dr. Nkrumah had advised the governor to dissolve the Legislative Assembly for new elections to be held for the granting of independence. In response to this, discussions were held by S.D. Dombo, Mumuni Bawumia, Yakubu Tali Tolong Na, J.A. Braimah, at that time the Kabachewura, and J.A. Nagba, then the Secretary to the Northern Territories Council, to decide on the Northern response to those developments. As a result of these discussions, they came to the conclusion that the North would be worse off if certain developments in physical, social, and economic infrastructure did not take place before independence was granted to the Gold Coast. They were convinced that they could not achieve their objective in a situation of disunity in the legislature. They therefore decided that the solution lay in the formation of a political party for Northerners in unity to fight to secure the much-needed developments and constitutional safeguards for the North before the grant of independence. In this regard, they also decided to make use of the protectorate status of the Northern Territories as the bargaining weapon for their cause. They accordingly agreed to the formation of the Northern People's Party to capture all or most of the Northern seats in the Legislative Assembly, in the hope that they would have a united force to bargain with the emerging government and the British colonial powers for a better future for Northerners when the country gained independence. The Northern People's Party also aimed to ensure that certain constitutional institutions were established for the Northern Territories to continue to provide the much-needed developments to bridge the gap between the North and the South within a reasonable short time, even after the grant of independence. In this regard, they had in mind a regional autonomy with executive powers to undertake such developments. Mr. Imoro Salifu from Boko was invited to join the party. In March 1954, Mr. S.D. Dombo, Mumuni Baumia, Imoro Salifu, and J. Nagba were mandated to tour the Northern Territories to introduce the party to the people. Mr. Chairman, by the beginning of April 1954, the initial campaign was over, and the first delegates conference of the Northern People's Party was held in Tolon Na's house in Sabongida. The Tolon Na himself was present and participated in the deliberations. These were the patriots who were driven by the collective good and not by personal interest. For example, the Congress proposed Mumuni Baumia as the chairman of the Northern People's Party, but he declined in favor of S.D. Dombo, the Duorina. Mumuni Baumia declined to be chairman because the strength of the NPP, the Northern People's Party, was in Mamprugu, which included present-day Boku and Bolgatanga districts of the Upper East region of Ghana, and he did not want the impression created that the Northern People's Party was a Mamprusi party. In fact, he said that people started calling the Northern People's Party the Nairi People's Party. The Nairi, who is the king of the Mamprusi kingdom, whose symbol was the elephant, was a strong supporter and financier of the Northern People's Party. Mr. A.F. Deremani Edagomba was elected General Secretary, Imoro Salifu of Boku was Propaganda Secretary, and J.B. Fuseni Lamashegna was elected Treasurer. The Northern People's Party leadership, for strategic reasons, let J.A. Braimah and Tolona contest the election, the 54 election, as independent members, but to join the party after the election. As a result, the Northern People's Party had no candidates in Gonja East and Tolong Kumbungu. The 1954 general elections gave the Northern People's Party 17 out of the 26 seats, including the independent candidates of Yakubu Tali and J.A. Braimah, who were sponsored by the party. Mr. Chairman, the Northern People's Party pursued the battle with the British colonial authorities and the government of the Gold Coast for the constitutional safeguards and developments of the North with renewed vigor after the 1954 general elections. The party had hoped that the Ghana Congress Party, which was its ally, would win enough seats to form the official opposition in the Legislative Assembly. The Ghana Congress Party, which was formed by Dr. K.A. Buzia and its leadership was made up of the professional-oriented leadership of the UGCC and some dissatisfied CPB members. In the event after the election, it turned out that only Dr. K.A. Buzia, the leader of the Ghana Congress Party, was returned to the assembly. The Ghana Congress Party won only one seat, which was Winchi, out of the election. Therefore, in accordance with British democracy, the Northern People's Party became the official opposition because they had the majority of seats, with SD Dombo as its leader. In another act of selflessness, incredible selflessness, the Northern People's Party agreed that notwithstanding being in the majority, they agreed to make Buzia the leader of the opposition. And this was done on the basis of Buzia's education, his exposure and competence, and to forge unity between the North and the South. At this time, ladies and gentlemen, at this time in 1954, when this alliance was entered into, the National Liberation Movement was not yet in existence. It had not yet been formed. So in fact, this 1954 alliance between Dankwa Dombo and Buzia traditions, in fact, predated the formation of the NLM and predated the formation of the United Party. Dr. Kwame Nkrumah, the Prime Minister, had hoped that the 1954 general elections would be the last before the grant of independence to the Gold Coast. But this was not to be. In 1955, a new, powerful political movement called the National Liberation Movement sprang up in Ashanti. 3 influential members of Nkrumah's CPP, namely Victor Owusu, Joe Appiah, and Arar Amponsa, crossed carpet to join the NLM, which was formed by Bafo Osei Akoto. The NLM was born with the slogan Federation for Ghana and campaigned vigorously for a federal system of government for the Gold Coast. Dr. Buzia of the Ghana Congress Party also joined the NLM. However, immediately after independence in 1957, the CPP government passed the Avoidance of Discrimination Act, which outlawed all political parties formed on regional, racial, and religious grounds. And so the Northern People's Party, which held the highest number of seats, went into alliance with other opposition parties to form the United Party, with Buzia as leader and SD Dombo as the deputy leader and J.A. Braimah as the national vice chairman of the United Party. Mr. Chairman, it is important to recall that as a member of the opposition, J.A. Braimah faced unthinkable difficulty, especially in his position as chief. His political enemies, within and outside his traditional area, instigated his removal as Kanisewura, barely a year after his elevation to the skin. His diskinment was grounded on a very weak and vexatious charge of visiting the United Kingdom as a member of the opposition delegation for constitutional discussions without permission from the Yobonwura. Try as he did, J.A. Braimah could not reverse the decision. Not until 10 years later, when the government of Dr. Kwame Nkrumah was overthrown, he would later be elevated to the paramount chief of Pembe traditional area, and then the Yabonwura skins as king and overlord of the Gonja kingdom. God indeed works in mysterious ways. The man who was diskinned is now the Yabonwura, overlord of the Gonja tradition. Similarly, in an environment where many feared to speak out when things were wrong, obviously for fear of incurring the displeasure of the CPP government, J. Braimah was forthright, honest, and firm in his constructive but articulate criticisms of the government's actions he deemed inimical to the development of the country. Predictably, this incurred for J. Braimah the wrath of the CPP government, and as a consequence, under the obnoxious Preventive Detention Act, the PDA, J. Braimah was placed under house arrest for several months. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, J. Braimah was a prolific writer, erudite researcher, and a scholar of Gonja history. He wrote several very important books on the Gonja people. His writings remain a reference point for many academic papers and books, including, obviously, the book or his biography that we are launching today. Mr. Chairman, J. Braimah was a man of varied talents, uncommon integrity, an embodiment of selfless public service. He was a man far ahead of his time. Indeed, he represents the most excellent specimen of the enviable Dankwa Dombo Buzia tradition, and this has never been lost on the New Patriotic Party. J. Braimah's abiding faith in a democracy that respects the rule of law, human rights, and the doctrines of the democratic accountability, and his quest to see the bridging of the development gulf between the north and the south of Ghana kept his name alive till today. It is for the struggles of J. Braimah and his compatriots that we have a Ghana that we are proud of today, a Ghana full of opportunities and a Ghana leaping into the future with great hopes and aspirations. This book, the biography of J. Braimah that we are launching today, is both timely and instructive. And we thank the author once again for making sure we have the benefit of this great man. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for your attention. God bless you, and God bless our homeland, Ghana. So, by the grace of Allah, I declare this book, J.A. Braimah, Biography of a Trailblazer, duly launched. Thank you very much.